So when we're starting to work or think about design systems, it's really important to be clear on what we mean when we say design systems. There's lots of different interpretations of that, and depending on how you come to the topic, depends on what you've read. And of course, that makes it quite confusing if it's a different description of the term than someone else might use. So, very often to me, it's not just about a library of components, whether that's in design or code. It's all of the people and the processes around it, which makes it a system. So you could have a UI kit over in your design tool, and that's brilliant. I'm sure that helps everybody. But it's still just a UI kit, unless you have some sense of governance, some ways of communicating, some ways of making decisions. And then it becomes more than just the UI kit, because there's a lot more process and context and understanding around it. And likewise in code, you can have a load of coded components in a repo somewhere, and that's to make it a design system. You've got some components, and they will help you, but in a different way maybe. So for me, it doesn't really matter too much whether you describe your components, your objects, in a design tool or code. We should be describing the same thing in different disciplines. And so one thing you can do is very consciously scope it and say, to us in our organization, our design system is, and very often it might be that if you're design weighted, so you have far more design resource than you have development, it's fine. You can quite easily say, well, our design system is this UI library with documentation. That documentation might be alongside your components, or it might be somewhere else. But it should be really clear for everyone to find out the purpose of it, how to use it, how to feedback, all of these kinds of things. And the opposite would be true if you're quite engineering led. If you just don't have design resource or not enough, you can start from the engineering side and say, to us, our design system is these coded components which have all these processes and documentation with it. Now, to me, the ideal would be you would have both. So you would have a library in a design tool, and you would have some coded components. Ideally, they'd match one to one. So the naming you use, the structure in the files, should be as close as possible to each other. Because it's not just then that they match. It's that we've actually started to build up a set of language to describe the assets that we have. So there's no kind of, oh, this component over here is called this in code. That shouldn't happen. They should be using the same language, because as a collective, working on doing some really good work for our end users, that helps things to be so much quicker. So when we talk about something like color or typography, and we've got an abstraction, that's part of our shared language. So then when we go back to what is a design system, it can be so much more than just these objects, because it's all about defining these processes to make things better, the feedback loops, how we communicate, and ultimately how we get really high quality code design out for that end users. And so that makes it more than just a set of components. It makes it more than a palette of colors or something, because it helps us really embed this stuff across every product team and continually improve, which is why a lot of people think of a design system as being a product or even infrastructure, as a colleague of mine said. For lots of people, this might be quite a challenge in terms of structure of organization. If you have a number of product teams, then this is a thing for the first time that cuts right across them, because it's for the betterment of every team to want to invest in the design system. The difference would be if you had a library in design or a repo of code. Without all of that, people could just put stuff in and it would be there to use. You wouldn't necessarily know if there's any rigor, if it's right or wrong to use. It's just shared. And that's where some of the difference lies. And that's also why it's quite complicated, and why I was starting to talk about it being a people problem and all of these kind of things, because a lot of the time that's the difference. That's what matters.